Travis Hunter is the consensus number one overall player in the 2025 draft. Could the Cowboys find a way to grab him? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You could start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. And on today's show, we're going to do some early draft preview coverage for the Cowboys. We know that this season is not going as well as many people hoped. And while we haven't completely forgot about this year, we have an extra day because the Cowboys play on Monday. So let's talk some draft, Landon. And the best way to start with draft coverage is to start at the very tippy top. And the number one overall player in this class, in both Mel Kiper's board and Dane Brugler's board, is Travis Hunter Jr. For the people that maybe don't follow college football or just hearing about him for the first time or so, can you tell us a little bit about Travis Hunter?
Yeah, I mean, Travis Hunter is he is probably the first true two-way player in major college football in quite some time. I would say 20 years probably. I mean, there may have been instances where there have been other players who have done it here and there. There may have been instances
where I think like Jabril Peppers at Michigan, but these were guys that would like play a couple snaps of offense or a couple snaps of defense. This is a full-time guy.
I think that's the difference, really, right? Is that like this isn't even quite like a Charles Woodson situation where Woodson was a valuable piece that they used on offense and obviously a huge special teams player for them for Michigan as well. This is a case where this guy is truly playing both ways. He is playing a full load of snaps at the wide receiver and at the cornerback position. And I think that alone is probably a noteworthy, endeavor in college football. It's certainly something that you would expect to see on a college game day reel or big noon kickoff the story, right? Yep. But the fact of the matter is that he's also probably the best player at the position on both sides, right? Or at least near the top at both positions. He's an incredible player. He's an NFL prospect. He's at the top of the draft, not because he plays two positions, but because he plays each of those positions so well that he could get drafted in the top 5. So he is a truly rare player. Honestly, my brain always associates him with Shohei Ohtani, right? With who plays for the Dodgers now, right? Where it's just like you don't have this. It just doesn't happen. Like you haven't had a guy that pitches as well as he does and bats as well as he does and does both full time and at an excellent level. And that's basically what Travis Hunter is pulling off in a much and in a much more cardio driven, two very cardio driven positions. So it's really, really impressive what Travis Hunter's done.
The only other two players that I can think of as comps would be Champ Bailey, who had almost 800 yards of receiving his final year at Georgia, and Chris Gamble, who played at Ohio State. Now, he wasn't as good of a receiver, but he did play in big spots for Ohio State. So those are like the last two to do this full time. We did see Marcus Jones a couple of years ago from Houston play some on offense, but the difference between Travis Hunter and those guys is Champ Bailey was a top 10 pick at corner. Chris Gamble was a first-round pick at corner. I think if you're just looking at Travis Hunter as a cornerback prospect, he's still probably the best player in this class. I think he is a better prospect than Patrick Surtain or J.C. Horn or Sauce Gardner.
Oh, yes.
But I think but the difference is, I think if he was only a wide receiver prospect, you're still talking about a top 20 player in this class. Yes. So to get a first-round caliber prospect on both sides of the ball, I don't think we've ever seen before.
Yeah, yeah, and again, I think there's a difference between, and that's what we're trying to delineate here, right? Is that there's a difference between a guy who is just an incredible athlete, and you've got to find a way to get the ball, right? Like that has existed a lot in college. This guy is a refined wide receiver. He is better than 99.9% of the wide receivers in college football at playing wide receiver. So and it does so a lot. It's not even like he's the main focus of their offense. So
yeah, he missed a game this year with an injury. He has 70 catches for 856 yards, and he leads the Big 12 in touchdown receptions with 9. Also, if you look at his advanced numbers from PFF, 99th percentile receiving grade versus single coverage, 95th percentile receiving grade overall, 89th percentile separation percentage, and one of the best in the country after the catch. Like, this is a bona fide first round receiver who happens to be even better on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that we is the biggest discussion around him is, how do you play him? How do you deploy him? And where do you play him in both sides? Can you continue to do this in the NFL? I think those are all going to be big questions that you have for him. But I think what you don't doubt is that you could draft this guy and he could be a starter, a high end starter for you on either side of the position, wherever you want to play him. And he's just a truly unique athlete and player in college football.
So let's go back to the beginning question. Could the Cowboys theoretically, or is it even possible to get Travis Hunter? I think my answer is yes, for a couple of different reasons. Number one, I think there's a very good chance that this team ends up being 3-8 by the time we get to Thanksgiving. And that's where things could really start to go down. They're only one game back of the number one pick right now in the 2025 draft. So they're not out of the equation at all. And Dion this morning, he was on one of the FS1 shows, and they asked him, like, hey, if Shedeur or Travis, if they get picked by a team that maybe you don't love, are you going to step in? And he said, yeah, I'm not going to do it publicly, but I'm going to go privately to these teams and try to find them good situations. You look at a couple of the teams that are drafting ahead of Dallas right now, whether it's Cleveland, Las Vegas, the Jets, Carolina. I've got to believe that Dion, who calls himself Travis's dad, is going to want to make sure that he gets into not only the best organization for his playing ability, but also for marketability, right? Like, you want Travis to go to a spot where he can be a superstar. I don't know where else better than Dallas to become that, Landon.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I don't know what kind of power Dion has to manipulate reality and kind of sweet talk GMs into convincing them to trade away their picks because they're not gonna be able to sign Travis Hunter. I obviously go back to the Eli situation and his dad, and I'm pretty sure, wasn't there a similar situation with John Elway and his dad, if I'm not mistaken, all the way back? So yeah, like this, there is precedent for this sort of kind of trying to manipulate the draft a little bit by suggesting that your super high end player is not necessarily going to sign with that team or want to move forward with that situation. So it would be interesting to see that play out, to be sure. And I do think that the Cowboys certainly are going to do their part as like by getting in striking distance,
getting
right?
in range,
so,
right? Well,
yeah,
I think for 99.9% of these prospects, like, that's just not in the cards at all.
Oh, no.
When you're talking about Dion, who does have some pull around the NFL, and Travis Hunter, who is a different dude in the sense that he got offers from every school. He was the number one overall prospect in his class. He got offers from Florida State, Alabama, Georgia, all those schools. And where did he go? Jackson State, right? Could, again, I'm not reporting this, but I'm saying, could he theoretically say, hey, Carolina, don't draft me at number 2, or I'll go play in the UFL and get $30 million a year, and then I'll re-enter next year. Like, I'm wondering if there's things like that could happen to potentially sway teams away from drafting Travis Hunter.
Yeah, I think, look, this is not something that is, likely to happen every year. It hasn't happened every year. It's a very rare occurrence. And in fact, I think it requires a kind of minimum threshold of demand, right? In that player. Like, you have to be kind of a high end player. And frankly, I think that the only non-quarterback who's ever kind of pulled off anything like this was Bo Jackson, right? Like Bo Jackson,
that's fair.
similar kind of situation. Except the difference is that he actually pulled off the threat, right? Like I think if I remember correctly, Tampa Bay drafted him and then he ended up just not showing up. So I do think that there is, that kind of option for a guy like Travis Hunter, who is a special player that is definitely going to be drafted by someone. He's not going to get like blackballed for pulling something off like this. The question is like, how much of a mountain can that move, right? Like, I mean,
Well,
if it's
I would
one
also
pick
say
or 2 picks, it's like maybe, but it's like
Dion, like famously, didn't take interviews or meet with any teams
That's right.
that were drafting outside the top 6.
That's right.
Now, could Travis theoretically just not go and interview with a couple teams? Maybe. I think the other thing that you need to have in order for some prospect like this to decide, hey, this is where I want to go or this is where I don't want to go, is to have perennial bottom feeders at the top of the draft, right? And unfortunately, you might have that. Like if Jacksonville ends up with the first overall pick, this will be the 3rd time they've had the number 1 overall pick in 5 years. If it's Carolina's had the worst record in the league in back-to-back years. So I think there is a chance that Dion and Travis and Shedeur, they look at the landscape of the top 10 and be like, hey, there's only 3 teams here where we want to play with. These are the only ones we're going to take interviews with.
And I also think that there's an element of unknowns here, right? Like we're venturing into kind of uncharted territory with a lot of this stuff. And Travis Hunter, I almost said Travis Henry. Travis Hunter, is kind of the first of his kind, almost a unicorn in this kind of new age NIL, forefront. Like, and that's part of the reason he was comfortable with going to Jackson, right? Is that he knew that he was going to get, money either way. So he could truly choose whatever, school he wanted to go to. I just wonder if we won't start to see more and different ways that we haven't even thought of yet of trying to manipulate the draft, manipulate this whole process so that the prospects have just maybe a little bit more control over the teams that they're going
to. And again, I know we're going long, but this is important. I think there are situations where someone like Travis Hunter might look at the amount of earning potential of going from, like, let's say Tennessee at 3 to Dallas at 8. Yeah, you're taking less money on the salary cap going at pick 8 rather than at pick 3, but you're going to be able to make up for it in endorsements. And I wonder if that's going to start factoring into the equation here with some of these more high profile athletes. So again, we're not suggesting that it's going to happen, but Dion's already laid it in motion. Like this could happen for Shedeur and for Travis Hunter as we get closer to the draft.
Yeah, we're not pulling this out of thin air. That's for sure. Like it certainly is already there. We're just pointing out what's there, frankly.
All right. So let's assume, and this is a major assumption, that the Cowboys land Travis Hunter somewhere in the 2025 draft. What is the best way to use him in the NFL? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you have to do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. It's also the only real money daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Download the PrizePicks app today and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the PrizePicks app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly. PrizePicks, run your game. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are discussing the number 1 overall prospect in the 2025 draft. All right, let's say the Cowboys go 4-13. They end up with a number 3 overall pick. They grab Travis Hunter. Now what? What's the best way to use him so you get the most bang for your buck?
So you start this conversation out as like a fan, right? As a fan who's hoping to get this player. He's a superstar. He could change your franchise, you hope. And then at some point you have to, put on your team building hat, right? And really kind of take a look at the best way to deploy this player. And this is where I have the questions for Travis is how do you fit him onto your roster, right? Because I think obviously in 2023, he played over 1,000 snaps.
He's already over 1,000 right now.
He's already over 1,000 this season. So is that the kind of exposure that you really want to have for a superstar player? And the real question I think that comes up is, what is your plan if he gets hurt, if he's starting both ways, right? If you've got him as your starter on both starting as a starting corner and wide receiver, do you have a solid enough backup to handle the situation when he turns an ankle and he's going to miss 3 games, right? Yeah. Because of that, I almost feel like, and he may not love this, I almost feel like you have to truly pick a side that you are making him as the main position. And then, I think you could start out at him being full time, both sides of the ball. But I do think that at a certain point, you are going to need to make a choice, right? And like when he starts getting banged up, or if you have to start limiting him, you're going to have to start pulling back from one of the two sides. And you should make that decision up front, because if you wait until, later, suddenly you've got defensive coordinators and offensive coordinators are fighting over this player. I just think that the one thing that we need to kind of consider that I don't think is being considered right now, because, Colorado can have 100 scholarship, wide receiver and cornerbacks, waiting in the wings if they need to. I think in the NFL, when you have limited resources, you have limited players you can bring to game day, you have limited players that you can bring on your roster. I'm not advocating against Travis Hunter, but what I'm saying is I do think that there is a conversation that needs to be had by the front offices of the team that draft him on how do we facilitate a player like this, because losing a player like this to injury, suddenly you have to fix 2 different sides of the ball, 2 different big, and we're talking at 2 really super key spots, right? Like wide receiver 1 or 2 and cornerback 1 or 2. So I think that if it's me, I'm all on board with having him play both ways, but I do think that you make a plan for the day when you need to pull him back from one of the 2 sides, because I do think that if you don't, you could really shorten this guy's career by exposing him to injury risk, to wearing him down. Just, he'll play 10 seasons worth of snaps in the 5 years that you have him under contract. So,
well, let me give you a perfect example of that. He last week against Texas Tech, he played 163 snaps in that game. 163 snaps.
Insane,
He's had 7 games this year where he's played over 122 snaps. You can't do that in the NFL. You will not last a 17-game schedule, soon to be an 18-game schedule. However, I do think there are ways that you can get him on the field for both offense and defense.
Yeah.
And I think the best way to do that is to kind of do what the Cowboys did with Dion in, and I'm trying to think, 96, 97, where he's your starting outside corner, and then he's your number 3-ish receiver. Now, again, when Dion was the kind of the de facto number 1 for that season, or the number 2, you weren't using as many wide receiver sets. So again, big picture here. Let's think for the Cowboys. You have CeeDee Lamb, you have Jalen Tolbert next year. We'll see if they bring back Brandon Cooks. You probably just have him rotate with whoever is that 3rd receiver, whether it's Jonathan Mingo, whether it's a draft pick, and you try to get him on the field for 15 to 18 passing snaps a game. Don't have him on the field in obvious run situations. Try to make sure that he's got enough of a break. I do think there's ways that you can monitor it where he's getting enough rest, but he's also impacting both sides of the ball.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing, right? Is that it's just going to take monitoring and kind of, some long-term thinking here, right? And I do agree. Like I'm glad that we're all kind of in the conversation now of playing this correctly. Like, and I think we can kind of move the conversation to this a little bit. Is he is definitely a cornerback who can play wide receiver.
Yes, correct.
He is an elite cornerback.
Elite corner. Yes.
Like I as a corner prospect, when I watch him, I see a super athletic Trayvon Diggs. Like that's my comparison, is a guy who has Trayvon Diggs' ball tracking skills, his ability to bait the quarterback, all that, except the difference is that this guy is a top athlete.
Yeah,
and not that Diggs isn't athletic, but that this is a top of the draft type of athlete, right? I think, that's where he is at his best. I think if you go back and watch, he's made huge leaps and bounds as a wide receiver this year. The difference between him as a wide receiver at this point last year and this point this year is quite a bit more. I mean, just in the details aspect, it feels like what he's done is really internalized his cornerback play into his wide receiver play. Now you're starting to see him run routes where he's messing with the quarterback's vision. He's paying more attention to the details. You're seeing more of palms out catching than palms up catching this season, which I think was one of my big knocks on him last year. So I think that this is definitely an elite wide receiver prospect. And if he didn't play cornerback, he's still a first round wide receiver prospect. But to be clear, like, this guy is a pretty rare generational cornerback prospect who is a, every year first round wide receiver prospect as well.
Yeah, and again, I think it's easier to game plan him into the offense every week than to maybe game plan him in the defense, where it's like, hey, Travis, these are the 12 routes or 12 plays we've got for you installed this week. Come work on those for a half an hour and then go back to defense. And I think you can still get some big plays out of him, and you use him in key moments. Hey, it's 3rd and 8 with the game on the line. You want him on the field, but on 1st and down and 10 to start the second quarter, I don't know if he necessarily has to be out on the field. I just think that's the best way to get the most value out of him and to protect your long-term asset here. Because if you draft Travis Hunter at number 1, number 2, number 3 overall, you want him to be a high-end player for the next 7-8 years, not just for 2 years. Let's talk, Landon, about some of the other needs the Cowboys have in the draft outside of just Travis Hunter. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Ultimate Pro Football GM. Hey, Cowboy fans, remember our great partner, Ultimate Pro Football GM? Well, they're back and they've added an amazing new game mode that we need to tell you about. The game that has you step into the shoes of a football franchise GM and lead it to glory now has a new head coach career mode. So on top of getting to build your dynasty by drafting players, signing free agents, and hiring a coaching staff, you now get to call offensive plays during the game as well. If you already have the app installed, be sure to update it so you can try out all the new features and the new game mode. If you don't have it yet, download it right now. It's a must-have for all football fans. I love it, and I know you will as well. Ultimate Pro Football GM is completely free. It has no ads, and it's 100% playable offline, so you can play on the go when you want to, when you or where you want to. And here's a special offer. For Locked On fans, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your franchise. Make sure to get it, as this perk will jumpstart your play and give you the advantage you'll want in creating a dynasty. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. Ultimate Pro Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk, wherever you download your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, let's talk about
real quick. Don't forget, NFC Squads also will be out tonight. It'll be on our feed, so just go check it out on our normal podcast feed or on YouTube channel. It'll be there as well. Always funny. Lots of still making fun of the Cowboys on there. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I have to say I have been a trooper going on there and taking bullets. You need to be on there as a human shield as well at some point, Marcus,
Yeah.
because I can't take this.
Big
It's a lot.
human meat shield. Yes. Also, go check out the crossover, which will be on Thursday.
Yeah.
With Locked On Texans. All right, let's talk about draft needs. I think you can make a case that a cornerback wide receiver combo is not the top need for the Cowboys, but Travis Hunter is such a special player that we had to devote an episode towards him. Outside of that, what would you say the Cowboys' biggest draft needs are going into next offseason?
Oh, I think they're fine. They don't really need anything. They could just kind of go into this. I mean, I think we're gonna sing a very familiar tune here. Unfortunately, I feels like it's going to be a lot of the same stuff. It's defensive tackle. I think running back is a spot, right? I think, you can make a case that offensive line may need to be considered high. I think that, to me, that's kind of where you start. I think wide receiver, is another spot that, like, you definitely could, we just kind of said that it wasn't necessarily a need, but I mean, certainly if a good wide receiver, first round wide receiver is available for the Cowboys, that's got to be on their radar, just to kind of add more firepower to this offense. But I think, look, as far as what this Cowboys team needs, it needs, some more toughness. It needs to be a little bit more gritty. It needs to be more physical. And I think, for 20 years running now, the defensive tackle is still a need for this team. And I think that's kind of where my eyes go first as far as big glaring needs. I don't know if that's going to be the first pick overall, but I just, again, we go into the season knowing that there was going to be a lack of talent there. It played out that way. It's become detrimental to the team. We go out of the season after a disappointing year with the same needs. So we'll see if the Cowboys can actually address it this year.
What's hard about the defensive tackle spot is that is a position with a really high bust rate at any point in the draft. Yeah. But in order to get those guys, you have to spend high picks. But but we know with drafting defensive linemen, it takes several years before they kind of get the strength ready to play at an NFL level. Can the Cowboys afford to draft, let's say, a defensive tackle inside the top 10 who is not a difference maker right away? I don't know. Or would they be better off trading mid-round draft capital for proven guys, or would they be better off just spending up in free agency and getting the top defensive tackle? I don't know, Landon. You're right. I think it's the number one need. I just don't know the best way for them to address it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the real problem, right? Is that I don't know that it's clear that I think that of all the things that we've talked about how this is not a very super deep draft class, and it's not a super, great class overall. It's maybe a little bit top heavy, but after that, it really falls off the cliff. The one spot where Dane Brugler just released his top 50, I think, a couple days ago, and the one spot where it does feel like they do have a lot of players, at least in the top 50, was defensive tackle. It seems like I think he had 6 in his top 50 that were defensive tackles. So I agree. Like, it's not as easy as, hey, pull the trigger on a first round defensive tackle, problem solved. If that was the case, the problem would have been solved already.
Yeah.
I think that the Cowboys have to kind of have a comprehensive solution here. This is one of those positions that you're right, that the hit rate is just not fantastic. So you may just have to throw a couple of different, tries at it. You may have to sign a guy in free agency. You may have to draft a guy high. You may have to trade a mid-round pick for a proven veteran. You may have to take all those routes. Currently, as it stands, the only person that you're probably guaranteed to have on the roster at defensive tackle next year is Mozzie Smith. And man, you don't even know that's for certain. Yeah. I mean, they're not going to cut him because of all the contract stuff. But the point is that there's nothing about Mozzie's play necessarily that has guaranteed him a spot for next year. It's only his contract. So I would say that if that's the case, you have literally one defensive tackle on this roster that's kind of penciled in for next year. I mean, because Osa's gone, right? So you've got a lot of work to do, and there's no reason that you couldn't spread that work out over draft, free agency, trade market.
I'm going to also point out 2 other positions. I think edge is a monster need for this team because Sam Williams going into the final year of his deal in 2025, coming off a torn ACL. Yep. DeMarcus Lawrence is a free agent coming off a major foot injury. I've got concerns that he's ever going to play football again. We'll see about Marshawn Nealon. I mean, we were encouraged by what we saw in the preseason, but he's missed a significant chunk of the year. Chauncey Golston is a free agent as well. I think this defense could really use somebody else that could give you some juice. Now, luckily for Dallas, if that's the direction that they decide to go in round one, this is a very good draft. Again, referencing Dane Brugler's his big board, 3 of his top 8 players are edge rushers in this class. And they're very different types between Abdul Carter, who is a speed rusher, Jalen Walker, who is like an edge linebacker combo, and then Mikael Williams, who is a massive edge rusher. You could grab one of those guys. I also want to point out receiver. You look at the NFC right now, and all of the top teams have multiple game-breaking weapons, either with a wide receiver and a tight end, like the Lions do, on top of Jahmyr Gibbs. The Eagles have Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. I would not be opposed to the Cowboys drafting some sort of receiver early in this class that could take some of the pressure off CeeDee Lamb and open up their offense a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think they need to go get 2 game breakers, right? Like a wide receiver and then another position of indeterminate position, right? Like it could be another wide receiver, a running back, a tight end. But I think they need, as far as like a big play dynamic, we've got a bunch of guys who can make who can hit the double, right? We need some home run hitters on this offense. We have, CD, but that's not enough, right? Like we need more there. So I think that's another area. Look, I just want to point out that you just ripped John Oning's heart out with a just offhand comment that we're not sure if DeMarcus Lawrence is ever going to play again. That was well, really
I mean,
but it's fair. It's a fair comment.
I meant was more like he's got a beautiful family. He could decide, hey, this is the major injury. Let me just go off and retire. I played 10 years in the NFL. I'm good.
You're certainly right. I'm just pointing out that John's on the floor bleeding right now. Listen, I think, we can't. The problem is on offense is that, like, I think they need playmakers. I think wide receiver is a spot that they specifically need. But I think beyond that, give me another game breaker at another position, whether that's a speed back that can be an alternate, right, to Rico, a move tight end that has some speed, or another wide receiver. I just think you need at least 2 more playmakers in this offense to kind of get back into the upper echelon, the top end of the NFL offenses.
Can I offer you a Michigan tight end in round 1?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I was about to offer us a Michigan defensive tackle in round 1, so it's not any better.
You have a PTSD. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
All right. So we're not going to do draft stuff every week, but we are going to be kind of previewing it as we get closer. We've got bowl season coming up not too far away. Believe it or not, I saw today that we've got Shrine Bowl and Senior Bowl invites are going out. We're not that far away from draft season. We will get you ready for that when the Dallas Cowboys season ends. Go make sure you check out the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.